All right. Hello, gods and goddesses. I'm Riley,
And I'm Leah.
and this is the Green Goddess Podcast. So, tonight we are going to be talking about Kali and the destruction as sacred creation. Since it is June as well, we are going to highlight it with the zodiac sign of Gemini and the masculine polarity.
Before we get started, as always, we're going to open up tonight's session with our intention. So here I am lighting our candle and opening up the space.
Thank you, Leah. So, as tonight our main topic is focusing on Kali and destruction and creation, we're going to give you a little bit of information about her. Kali, one of the most complex and potent goddesses in Hindu mythology, embodies the profound duality of destruction and creation. She's often depicted with untamed hair, a necklace of skulls, and a blazing gaze. She is the uncompromising mother who annihilates illusions, ego, and ignorance, not out of cruelty, but as an act of sacred transformation. Her fearsome appearance is not meant to terrify, but to symbolize the raw truth of impermanence and the necessity of letting go. Her power lies in the ability to dismantle what no longer serves, making space for growth and renewal. As the divine counterpart of Shiva, the god of dissolution, she completes the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Through her, we are reminded that destruction, when guided by wisdom, is not an end, but a vital beginning. So, having said that, I will ask you, Leah, what is the main things that you think about when you reflect on the goddess Kali?
For me, what comes up the most is her destructive nature, is her fearsome side. And these are the aspects, as you touched on, that people tend to shy away from and be a little uncomfortable around. But it's realizing that there's sacred initiations taking place through these fearsome aspects of Kali. She is the mother, and it's realizing that even though she can be fearsome, she can also be very gentle and compassionate. And sometimes we need to go through the fear, we need to go through the destruction to get to the loving and compassionate aspects.
Yeah, I totally agree with that definition. And I guess when you think of Kali as kind of a shapeshifter, able to take on all these different forms, for you, when you think of Kali, like what does she look like?
For me personally, Kali is one of the goddesses that I know is protecting me. So I'm fortunate in a sense that I've been privy to her more gentle, compassionate nature. She is still very fierce, very protective, but to me, she shows up as the loving, compassionate, understanding mother. She's always the goddess that I know I can turn to, and she's never been a goddess that I have feared.
I love that. And it's like you say, she is a mother, and sometimes you have to give tough love to people, and that may come in the form of transformation or disillusion or destruction. But at the end of the day, it's for your better good.
And I would also add to that that it's out of love, even though it might not always be perceived or feel that way.
Yeah, of course. Transformation can be very difficult and challenging. She's here to show you that it's possible and it isn't as terrifying as it seems, and that death of these things is a natural process of life.
Exactly.
So, I guess stepping into also it being June and the season of Gemini, how would you describe her duality in that sense? Seeing as Gemini represents the twins, they kind of have those two energies. How would you relate that to the goddess Kali?
That's an excellent question. I think the duality when it comes to Gemini is a perfect symbol for Kali in the sense that she is both destructive and creative. And it's realizing that both these aspects live between us, and we tend to think that one exists over the other when they're actually in existence in perfect harmony with one another, and they simultaneously exist at the same time. The idea or image that's coming to me right now is when a woman conceives a child, there's a death taking place, a form of destruction of the maiden self to eventually rebirth the mother archetype. So it's realizing that we can experience a destruction of self while simultaneously holding space for the creation of another self. People tend to think it's one or the other, when in reality, it's both. Same thing for Gemini. They can get a bad rap for being two-faced, but it's realizing that ultimately there's integration and wholeness that can be found.
So I guess if Geminis can learn from Kali, it would be to stop kind of flip-flopping between the two energies of death and rebirth and kind of flow through them instead of going through the death and then the rebirth and then the death and rebirth. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd also say that they need to find a point of wholeness in the dual aspect, realizing that they can reach a point of integration. And ultimately, as you mentioned earlier, it's realizing that we are shapeshifters. We
Yeah.
are both things and not both things at the exact same time. And this is where we can talk about paradox. Again, this is a topic that makes a lot of people uncomfortable because a lot of people's brains are programmed in black or white. Well, is it this or is it that? It's both, but it's also none of them. And people are like, what? How's that possible? But it's realizing that we are an image of the universe. The universe is everything but nothing at the same time. And when we can come to a sense of peace and wholeness and realize that we might not ever understand what that means, we can come back to our sense of self and just operate from a more holistic persona.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that saying. And in terms of the duality and being able to be both at the same time, I think we had a great example of that today with this huge dark thunderstorm rolling in on one end with thunder and lightning, but still having that light and some sun on the other side, bringing in both of those energies and showing that duality is present in nature and around us all the time. And in terms of relating back to Kali, how would you relate her into the mother of earth or the mother of the environment and how she performs in that role?
Well, I would say Kali, she serves first and foremost the soul, and she's here to destroy any limitations or blocks that we might be carrying, and she will force us into ego deaths if necessary. It's realizing that depending on the type of soul you are, the type of person you are, her approach is going to be personalized based on how you approach and handle her as well. If you go with a loving and open heart, in my experience, and through speaking with a few other people, she's very gentle and kind. But if you're really solidified in your ego, you're going to have a harder time with her energy because she is going to come through and really seek to destroy what's stopping you from really embracing your true self, which is your soul. So, coming back to your question about how we see Kali's nature in the storm we experienced earlier today, and also seeing the aspects where there was still some sunlight, she's the embodiment of both. And she's going to shapeshift depending on what side you need. If you need more fierce, as you mentioned, tough love, she will slip into that role and be that energy. If you need more compassion, love, and understanding, she will be that loving mother. So it's realizing that as the goddess, she shapeshifts and she appears exactly how you need her to appear. And brief segue, if I may, there seems to be this preconceived idea that a connection with a goddess needs to look a specific way. You see it in a lot of Facebook groups that the way to appease a certain goddess or god is this way or that way. But fundamentally, a connection with a deity is deeply personal and it's going to look like exactly what you need it to look like.
Yeah, well, I think that's well said. And for you, having received the call of Kali, what would you say that looks like for you personally? Touching on how you said in Facebook groups or in certain spiritual communities, your relationship with a god or goddess should look a certain way, but we know that in this day and age, especially these dark mothers or these dark goddesses are kind of calling on their champions to come forward. And so, again, how did that call come through for you from Kali?
My experience with Kali was really interesting. So it happened years ago now. I can't remember when exactly, but it was during a pick a card. The pick a card was who is your patron goddess. And even before the reader mentioned Kali Ma, I felt her energy. overcome and protect me. I was in a bad relationship at the time. And so I automatically felt her protective energy, almost possessive energy, kind of take over to really shield me from something not meant for me. And then the reader began the reading, and it was Kali that came through. I remember being covered in chills from head to toe and just feeling this very fierce love overcome me, and a sense of just belonging and homeness. Feeling like I finally found, okay, this is where I'm meant to be. This is who is I'm meant to lean on in my times of need. And I'd say the relationship developed from that day. Me leaning on her when I need her. I also gifted myself the Holly Oracle as well. So I lean on that when needed. I mean, I definitely feel I should lean on it more. In the instances where I feel that I don't need her, it's when I need her the most. But that's what my relationship looks like at the moment. It will evolve, it will change. We'll see how it goes. But for now, it's calling on her when I need her, sending prayers, sending thanks to her, and drawing oracle cards when need be.
I love that. And I think it's a great way to show to people that being called forward by a god or goddess is something that is happening, especially in today's society. We need that change. We do need a bit more destruction in order to make way for more creation. And leaning into that topic, was there at any point that you felt unworthy of this call? Or did you immediately feel drawn? Or was there a part of you that kind of was like, oh, why me? Why you calling on me, girl? Like, a little scared or anything or intimidated, or was it more of like an open relationship, something that felt very comfortable?
I'd say it felt overwhelming. The love, the care, the compassion, because as we've seen mainstream people talking about Kali is her destructive, fierce side,
Hmm.
whereas that's not the experience I had with her. My experience was how deeply loving she is, and doing my best to move through those aspects that felt unworthy of a goddess's love come through so fiercely. I kept having moments where I would wait for her to almost tear me down and rip me a new one, so to speak. But those moments have never come. And I know in my heart they won't, because she knows how sensitive I am, and that's not how my soul responds to things. But still, to be so held in that way is truly humbling. That relationship just keeps opening my heart in bigger and deeper ways, because, as mentioned, even though I could probably lean on her a lot more, every time I've said I'm okay, but I've pushed myself to go draw a card for myself, the message has been exactly what I've needed every single time. And I'm like, why have I held back from leaning on my mother? So there's this aspect, and it is making me emotional right now. There's this wounded aspect of I should be able to handle this on my own. I shouldn't have to lean on
Mm.
my mother. And it's realizing that when the mother archetype comes through as a goddess, she is all encompassing. She is ultimately loving. And that's ultimately why I believe she calls certain souls forward, is to bring us home to that truth, which is love. It might take a different shape,
Hmm.
because with Kali, it is destruction, creation. Lilith, it's empowerment,
Hmm.
independence. But ultimately, I believe the goddesses are leading us back to that love.
Yeah, I do believe that that's what they are here to show us, that they emit this unconditional love. And as we've been talking about, it might not come in the most conventional way or the way that we expect it to, just because of how destructive, maybe terrifying or scary some of these aspects might be. But at the end of it, when you answer the call and when you show up to accept this message, you see that yes, underneath it all, it is unconditionally loving. And that's why they want you to go through these cycles. That's why they want you to go through the death and the rebirth, even though it might be scary or ugly. And speaking on that, you mentioned that she came to you during a difficult relationship. So I'd like to ask you, in what way did you find she supported you in either annihilating illusions or breaking patterns or breaking through any ego patterns that might have been holding you back in that relationship?
Well, I'd say for me was realizing that I don't need to lean on a partner that's not good for me. I don't need to be seeking love, approval, support from someone who's not good for me. And she came in I wouldn't say not to be the replacement, but to show me a different way of being and realizing that I can lean in to her love and my faith and my spirituality, and that I don't need to keep entertaining a toxic relationship. So at that point, just her fierceness, her love, her power made me realize that as a woman, I don't need to entertain anything that's beneath me. And she really empowered me in that moment to know my worth and to eventually walk away from that relationship.
I love that. I feel like that's very powerful. And I think she also might have come forward to show you that you are worthy of being loved in all of your facets. Even if you have egotistical moments, even if you have maybe shadow moments, that doesn't mean you're not worthy of being loved. And maybe this partner showed you that, hey, if you have traits that maybe aren't as desirable, then you aren't desirable. Kali is here to show you that, look, I have all of these traits. I wear skulls around my neck. You think I really give a shit if people are like, ooh, you're dark and scary, or you have problems, or you have an issue with this? Like, no, we all have those aspects of ourselves. We are human at the end of the day. And I think part of her wanted to show you that you are worth loving with all of these aspects, that you don't have to be quote unquote perfect to please someone else. You just have to be unapologetically yourself.
1,000%, Rye. I would agree with what you just said.
Because there are shitty people out there and they want you to be in line with their ideals and with who they want you to be. But at the end of the day, the person you should strive to be with is the person who's going to love you for all of those facets, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it is. That's what unconditional love is. It's understanding, again, we are all human. We're all on this earthly plane together. We're all trying to learn. And Kali comes forward as a goddess, showing that even gods and goddesses have light and dark. We tend to portray them in this pedestal style space. We think of a lot of religions, Christianity, putting their deity up on this pedestal, saying, well, they're all good and righteous. They can only do great things. But again, we're being shown that no, they're all dual. They all have their own aspects, and actually, a lot of them enjoy the humanity aspect of it because they get to grow, they get to learn, they get to do maybe stupid things or bad situations. But again, you grow from that and you become a better version.
Yes, I definitely agree with that.
Is there anything you'd like to add to the things that we've been discussing?
Well, I think I'd want to circle back to her destructive nature and highlight that it's not to be feared. A lot of times, fear stems from unreclaimed power. And it's realizing that we need to take the time to dive into that fear and find its root so we can unroot it, rip it out, implement, and allow our real power to shine through.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And as I mentioned earlier, Kali does have a divine counterpart known as Shiva, the god of disillusion. And so they do kind of also show that duality in a different sense. And so relating that to Gemini, what would you say about that? Like the two sides of the coin and how they merge and coexist together. Since we are in June, it's not just Geminis that are experiencing this energy, it's everyone in general. We are feeling that back and forth, that like maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't kind of thing. So, how would you explain that to someone in this season in terms of the duality and in terms of which way they should lean?
Well, I would say as soon as you started talking about that, the image that came to mind is divine feminine, divine masculine, and then the shadow aspects of both, and then the light aspects of both. So I think it's realizing that it goes beyond duality to encompass these four pathways you can choose and take depending on the scenario you find yourself in. Again, to just re-highlight what we mentioned in the first episode, regardless of gender, it's realizing that both these energies coexist within you. You have divine masculine, you have divine feminine, and it's for you to decide, okay, am I going to go take massive action? If you're in the action energy, you're in your masculine. Are you being overly aggressive, overly bold? Are you cutting people off? Or are you taking action from a place of centered leadership? Speaking your truth, but also allowing other people to share their truths. So, right there, we see the shadow aspect of the masculine versus the light aspect of the masculine. We are often fueled by fears, insecurities, doubts, and it's those energies that are distorted that usually fuels the shadow aspects. So for people kind of feeling that back and forth energy, they need to take a step back and reflect on, who am I embodying? Am I feeling insecure about a meeting at work tomorrow? Is that why I'm feeling the need to cut people off and be more aggressive? And then on the flip side, we have the feminine energy. She's more passive, she's more nurturing. On her shadow side, she can be very controlling, demanding, needy. So, as we mentioned, both these energies live within everybody. So, people need to turn their gaze inwards and really ask themselves, are my emotional needs being met? Or am I falling into wanting to fix, control, nag, and be needy because I'm not actually fulfilling my own emotional needs? Or am I able to redirect my energy into a healthy feminine outlet, going for walks, spending time in nature, journaling, maybe spending time in solitude if that feels appropriate? And when it comes to that back and forth, especially if a decision needs to be made, taking a pause, realizing that hopefully there's not a life on the line, but that they have the time to make a decision. They can take a step back, take a breath, reassess, and see what pathway feels the most supportive for them moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think that taking the time is very important. As a fellow air sign, I know that sometimes thoughts and emotions can move through us quite rapidly. And also on the flip side, we also have the other side where we tend to kind of stew and overthink and just meddle with kind of our own thoughts when we should be, taking that reflective moment to think about what we want to do before we react to a situation, but also not take it into the place where we're overthinking it or we're muddling it over for hours or days or something like that. And so understanding that this energy is here to kind of teach us how to reach that middle point, that more balanced and centered aspect of the duality, not acting super quickly or rashly because someone pissed us off at work, and then not also taking an excessive amount of time to stew over things that maybe might have just been a quick reaction or something like that. Like if you received a message that maybe didn't sound great or that you took wrong, taking less time stewing on that and just being like, you know what, it is Gemini season. Maybe I'm dealing with people who are in their reactive energy instead of their more reflective energy, and taking that time for yourself, but not overdoing it and kind of letting it go.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I like that you mentioned that other people might be in their reactive energy, because Gemini's planetary ruler is Mercury. It is a fast moving planet. So, as you said, there's the energy moving quite quickly through the mind, and being attentive not only to ourselves, but others, because we're all in this together, can really help lean into patience before responding and taking that step back.
Yeah, of course. And I see Holly kind of coming through on both ends, right? That when we react impulsively, we can be destroying in kind of a negative way others around us. But then if we take that time that's too long to reflect, we might start being destructive towards ourselves. And so reaching that balance in between becomes really important because, and as we've discussed with Kali, destruction needs to be done with awareness. And so if you're doing it out of reaction, then you might end up getting some karma from that because it isn't done with that love or that awareness of, I'm going to destroy purposefully. You're kind of doing it because it's a reaction, it's a gut feeling, and you're like, I need to do this. This person's pissing me off, instead of coming at it from a more grounded approach, which obviously can be very difficult in Gemini energy, with it being an air sign, being all up in the air, being a mental sign. It is hard to take that time to ground it. But Quali says that it is important to ground that destruction if you are going to go forward with it, because it needs to lead to creation. It can't just be destruction for the sake of destroying, which I know some of us enjoy. I'm part Aries, so I get it completely, but it's taking that time to reflect and to think, to act instead of reacting to a situation.
I find that was really well said.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to move forward in another topic, seeing as June and Gemini are masculine polarity in the form of destruction, and how the masculine has corrupted destruction a little bit in the past centuries. We've seen war, we've seen death, we've seen rape, we've seen just nonsensical destruction, if you think about it. Sons and daughters terminated for a lot of the time petty kind of stupid shit. And I guess I wanted to get your opinion on that. The destruction seen by the masculine in the last centuries, and why you think that it's been distorted in that way or claimed by the masculine in that way.
That's a very good question. And I'm covered in chills just listening to it. It's because it ultimately belonged to the goddess. Now, I know this is going to probably trigger some people, especially people that believe in the creation story, but ultimately, destruction and creation emanates from the goddess. Everything was born through her womb. That's where life stems from. And it's realizing that she's held the power to create and she's simultaneously held the power to destroy. And when we look at both these forces from an objective lens, we realize that they are fucking powerful.
Yeah.
And power has a way of being desired by people not mature or responsible enough to wield it. And let's tie
Mm-hmm.
in conscious enough to wield it.
Yeah.
So, sure enough, back in the day, it was goddess worship. We didn't hear about gods at that time. And if we did, they were nature based gods. They supported nature, who fundamentally is Gaia, is the Green Goddess, which we're about. And it's realizing that there was a lot more peace back then. We can think of pagans who were in flow with the cycles. And eventually came Christianity that wanted to distort all that. It was a God driven movement, God being masculine, which is really strange to think about it, how they're putting a gender on a higher being and seeing this being as superior to the goddess. So
Yeah.
everything she stood for was almost eradicated, and what wasn't was distorted to make her softer, gentler, less powerful. So all her aspects that made her fierce and worthy of devotion and respect were removed. Destruction falls into that category. The
Mm-hmm.
goddess was destruction. She would bring the tides, she would bring the storms, she would bring the fires. Patriarchy slowly weaseled its way into that, stripped her from that power, and claimed it for themselves. And it's realizing that another person's power cannot be claimed for your own. It's always going to be distorted because it is not yours.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%. I think that's very true. And yeah, relating to the masculine and even patriarchy in history in terms of how it has, since the Middle Ages, probably even before that, we've seen a lot of destruction, a lot of torture, a lot of just ugly, nasty things. And just to bring up a small topic of something that I was recently listening to is the witch burnings. And that again showed a masculine fear towards women's ability to destroy through said curses, through said hexes, and dancing with the devil, and all of these things where we were able to have these immense powers to destroy, and that terrified people. And so they had to be hung. But then there was also the other aspect in those women. Yes, they might have had destruction in them, but they were also healers. They were herbalists. So they were the ones who were also protecting people and healing them in the communities. So how would you relate to that, considering that it was more masculine based, it was more patriarchy based that supported these burnings, that supported these murders, realistically? Even though years later, some of them are like, oh yeah, we did fuck up. We shouldn't have done that. But it's just like, where was their mindset in the moment? And what would you think about that?
Well, I think if we really reflect on this, we realize how ugly and destructive fear can be. And destructive that is not for the highest good, that is for selfish gain.
I agree. A lot of it was out of fear, and that is what most of them said. We were kind of hysterical almost out of fear that we didn't understand what was happening. These, a lot of the times, very natural things like cows dying suddenly or people dying of natural causes were seen as some kind of magical superpower, supernatural aspect that was happening. And then somehow, if people got sick, well, then this woman would be able to heal them. And it's like, well, of course you were able to heal them. You're the one who put that on them in the first place. But it's understanding that there are both sides. And like we've mentioned with a lot of these more feminine energies, there is always creation on the other side. There is that rebirth. And we haven't always seen that with the masculine destruction or the patriarchal destruction, where after war, and even today we still see war, what is the rebirth after? A lot of the time we don't see rebirth, and that's why history kind of keeps repeating itself in that sense, where it's fear leads to war, it leads to mass destruction and death, but then there's no rebirth, there's no positive, there's no learned lesson on the other side.
I would agree with that. It's illustrating, as we've mentioned, that it's distorted destructive power. And I like the way you describe that they destroy this war and there is no rebirth because it's not divinely wielded power. It's power that's been taken and it's not theirs. As we've discussed, this is often motivated by selfish gain.
Yeah.
The goddess is balance. She's destruction to recreate, to rebirth. Whereas the masculine, when it's distorted, wielding energy that it's not theirs to wield, it is going to be fucked up in the way that it's displayed. And we are witnessing that. We see a lot of masculine leaders go to war and it's death. Children, women, the environment, animals, nature. It's pure destruction. And you're right, Riley, in saying, where's the rebirth? It's not there because who births? It's the mother, it's the goddess. That was never masculine's role in the first place. It's always been the goddess, and that we can't be wielding this power without her.
Yeah.
So tying it back to Gemini, we need both masculines and feminines striving to destroy what keeps us caged, what keeps us limited. We need to work together so that we can recreate and rebirth a better world together. And interestingly enough, the vision I'm getting right now is again of the mother who's conceiving a child. She co created with a masculine. And it's realizing that the masculine's role is to co create along the goddess, not replace her.
I agree. And what you were saying also made me realize that a lot of masculine or patriarchal destruction has been done through ego, through selfish gains, as you mentioned, instead of from a higher point or from a creative point. And if you think about the feminine or Kali in the way that she destroys, it's from a detached perspective. If a volcano erupts or a hurricane hits land, she's not like, I'm targeting that person specifically because fuck you, that's why. No, it is from a detached point. It is, I'm going to destroy, doesn't matter who or what or where is in this situation. It is from a detached perspective because I know that this destruction will lead to a better future, will lead to a rebirth. Just like Pompeii or a volcanic eruption, she didn't care who was at the bottom of that volcano. It wasn't just like you specifically, it was, this is part of my cycle. I will unfortunately, fortunately, whichever, I don't know how she feels, destroy this life. All of it, not just humans, nature, animals, all of it. But there will be a rebirth afterwards. There will be new land. It will be fertile. It will be able to support even more life than what was there before.
That was beautifully said.
Thank you. And I guess, yeah, so that's a lot of what the topic is tonight and what Kali wants to showcase is that death and destruction and all of these things can't be done from a selfish lens. You have to be able to think of it from a higher perspective. And if not, then Kali is going to come and destroy you as kind of the balancer of that. If you are not aligned with the
Cue the dog interrupting. We have our familiar that has decided to grace us with his presence.
He joined the chat. He agrees that destruction must be done with awareness.
You think so? The way he destroys his stuffed animals and his squeaky toys?
Maybe not. He's still working on his spiritual growth, eh? But again, he is just a little dog. So he works in his own mysterious kind of ways, eh?
That he does.
But anything else you would like to add on today's topic?
Well, I really resonated with what you shared about Pompeii and how it got destroyed, which was terrible for the people living there at the time. But I like how you highlighted that the mother was doing that so she could support more life. And again, it's that added value of the rebirth that's occurring. And when it comes to Gemini season, though we might be playing out that duality between the shadow and the light, we need to be able to dive in deep into ourselves, go through the destruction, knowing that there's a rebirth. We talked about this a lot in our last episode. If death, rebirth is something that resonates, I would invite you to go listen to that episode. But it's planned, it's orchestrated. Even though we might not know what the rebirth looks like, we need to trust that if we're being called to destroy something by the goddess or getting an intuitive hit, however that resonates, we need to trust and follow through with the destruction of the limiting beliefs, the egoic self, the blocks, and know that there is going to be a rebirth at some point in time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that is very well said. And I think if you're okay or if you have anything else to add, we can kind of do a closing that if death or rebirth is something that still scares you or seems daunting, I think we would both invite you to look into Kali, to research her and to see all of her facets, all that she offers. She's not just the skull wearing fierce warrior, but she is also, as my sister has said, the very unconditionally loving and graceful and caring mother.
And I would also mention that ultimately she's the liberator. She's here to destroy, cause death for your own greater good and freedom.
Yeah, 100%. If you're not afraid to lose a part of yourself, then you're not ready to become a better version of yourself either.
Exactly.
All right, so we are going to move to our last segment for tonight. And seeing as it is a masculine polarity month, we are going to be pulling a masculine card. Tonight's deck, we are pulling from Gods and Titans, which is by Stacey DeMarco. So I will go ahead and shuffle these and see who comes out as a supportive energy for tonight's session.
The card couldn't be more fitting, guys. We have the Green Man, abundance.
Yeah, I think that that's beautiful. I think he's here to kind of show us, and possibly a lot of the masculines that are potentially listening to this podcast, that rebirth is a necessary part of destruction. The Green Man represents abundance. He represents healing. He represents that renewal of life, that ability to recreate after a destruction. And I find that, yeah, it's very fitting that he's here to kind of support that, seeing as Holly is more the mother of destruction, and the Green Man is kind of the counterpart in the sense that he is that renewal, he is that healing, he is the light on the other side, if you will.
I just love that the Green Man has come out because this is the Green Goddess Podcast, and we have her own counterpart coming out in a way. We were talking about Kali and how Vishnu is her counterpart. So I find it really synchronistic that we basically have the counterpart to the Green Goddess coming out tonight. We have the Green Man, and when he's anchored, rooted in his heart and who he is abundant and also fertile. Because again, when we talk about conceiving children, the man also needs to be fertile. It's a two-person job. And I find that this ties in beautifully with Gemini energy. We have the Green Goddess who's fertile, rich, and abundant, and her counterpart is just as rich, fertile, and abundant. This is a very important reminder for our masculines who are or might be on their spiritual journey and path, wondering what they do have to offer. Because as we discussed tonight, we basically said, hey, destruction belongs to the goddess. And some men might feel a little uneasy with that realization, but it's realizing that they have their own power to tune into, and the green man is a beautiful archetype to lean on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Because often, like you said, we see, well, destruction and fertility as more of a feminine energy, but as you said, both energies are required in order for these things to occur. You do need the masculine aspect and the feminine aspect in order to balance the destruction and the rebirth that comes afterwards. They need to work hand in hand. And like I mentioned, not in ego or in shadow, but in balance and in unconditional love, because that's where true growth comes from. That's where the true abundance stems from. It's two lovely individuals, masculine, feminine, or even the same energies within you, working together to create a more balanced and harmonious state.
Exactly. And I love the imagery on this card. We see this deity holding a plant in what appears to be their left hand, and then they're radiating out that hand forward. So, again, usually the left hand symbolizes receivership. So, receiving that fertility, that abundance, and then that raised hand is outputting that fertility, that abundance. So, we're seeing that sense of balance and harmony mirrored in this card, and how, as we've mentioned, we need both.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love also how in this deck, the Green Man is represented as a god. Some people might think of him as more of like a figure of nature or maybe a lesser deity or things like that. But in this deck, he's really depicted as this strong and powerful figure, which is what most masculines, either inside of you or externally, should be striving for. It's understanding that there is strength in rebirth, there is strength in abundance, there is strength in fertility and creating something that is beneficial for more than just yourself.
Yeah, and I would add to that that there is strength in co-creating. I think that for the longest time, masculines and patriarchy have distorted the destructive energy because they've been conditioned to believe that they are the ones that have exclusivity over destruction and creation, and have completely shafted the feminines. But it's
Mhm.
coming back to our truth and our remembrance that no, we are both divine, and both masculines and feminines need to do the inner work. Ultimately, as we've mentioned a lot tonight, there is great strength and power when we're able to come together.
Yeah, I think with Kali and Gemini season, we've discussed both sides of duality, light, dark, destruction, rebirth, with Gemini reacting versus overthinking. And I think a lot of what this is bringing us to is that inner balance, that inner harmony that you need to be in between both. You can't be one extreme or the other. You can't be just masculine or just feminine. It really needs to come together in a very harmonious and loving, balanced way.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I think that wraps it up. So thank you so much for your insights and all answering all of my questions tonight. I think it'll be very insightful for a lot of our listeners.
I think so too. I think there's a lot of value. And as always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions, comments, any topics you'd like us to explore. We are here to be of service.
And with that said, good night or good morning, whatever time it is to you beautiful gods and goddesses.
Peace out.